Hey, 110, Ensign Alex Wong here again with Captain Mullaney. We're here to talk to you today about accommodating emotions. So, Captain, how do you develop the skill of accommodating emotions?
Right. So, you have the classic advice that if you're angry, count to 10,
Hmm.
right? And that's actually exceptionally good advice because you're creating separation between the stimulus and the response, and you're trying to create space for your intentionality to step in there. So that would actually be an accommodation, right? To give yourself, your system to the space to intervene when you're feeling that strong emotion.
Why don't you tell me about the vagal break?
Right. So, if you're angry, we talked about you could count to 10, right? And give yourself some space in between the stimulus and the response of your emotion. So that's exceptionally powerful. But even more powerful, you can actually, to some degree, control your physiological response to the emotions that you're having. So a vagal break is really just a breathing exercise. It functions best if you actually just sit up in your chair, put your hands in your lap, breathe in deeply, maybe for about 4 seconds, and then breathe out deeply for about 4 seconds. And this actually has a pretty strong physiological impact on your body, which affects your emotions. So in essence, what you're doing is your mind is being flooded with the emotion, and you're creating a break that instead of your mind focusing on the way that your body is feeling and responding, instead you're literally breaking the input from the emotion into your mind, and you're just creating a pause. And it's even more powerful, like I said, than just counting to 10, to try to dampen your emotions, because you're actually physiologically causing a break.
So this break, it slows down our emotional reactions, and it allows our conscious to catch up with us, and instead of acting too quickly and too hastily.
Right. Yeah, my favorite quote is from Viktor Frankl. Between stimulus response, there's a space, and that space is our ability to choose, and that ability to choose is our freedom and our identity. Um, so really, that's what the vagal break is doing. It's actually using our physiology to create that space between stimulus and response, and to optimize our intentionality.
So anger would be like accommodating your own emotions. What about accommodating other people's emotions? Is that it?
Right. Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. One of the best things we can actually do with other people's emotions is to validate them, and is actually just to acknowledge that the other person is having an emotion, and in some ways that you don't feel like they're crazy for having that emotion. Words can be really important here. Saying to somebody else, it makes perfect sense to me that you're feeling the way that you're feeling. There's this, once again, you can actually help people understand their own emotions and say, this is happening, and so it makes sense to me that you would feel these things about that. And you're not overclaiming there. You're not saying I feel exactly the same things that you do. You're not overclaiming and say that I understand the way that you feel. That seems like you're validating when you say that, but oftentimes the way people experience that, I understand how you feel, uh, oftentimes that makes people feel like you're minimizing what they feel. And another human instinct, just because we have an associative memory, if somebody tells you about a loss of a loved one that they just had, associatively that brings up the loss that I just had a couple months ago. And oftentimes it's not terribly helpful when someone just said, I just lost my best friend, and you said, yeah, I know, I lost my grandmother last month, right? So yes, you've expressed empathy, but you haven't necessarily helped that person deal with the emotion that they're feeling. You just brought yourself into it. Sometimes people will feel like you're making it about you, right? And in that moment when they're engaging with you, uh, that's not necessarily the best way that you can help them accommodate. Um, but validating that it makes sense. They have a right to their own emotions. That's one thing that you're validating. We all have a right to feel the way that we feel, right? It might not be optimal to feel the way that we feel at any given time. It might not even make sense, right? But helping people understand, what is the cause and effect for how they feel, and giving them the right to feel those things actually makes them feel empowered and will make them more likely to be able to accommodate.
What are some other things that we can do to accommodate emotions better?
Another aspect of accommodating emotions when it comes to other people, right, is that we exist in relationships with other people. And what we can do to accommodate emotions and use our emotions effectively is to enter into conversations about the emotions that we're feeling with other people more actively, right? So one of the 8 skills of emotional intelligence that you'll read about is that people who are emotionally intelligent are actually assertive. And I don't think the connection between those two things is obvious. But probably the healthiest relationship that you could possibly have is when somebody irritates you. If you have an open enough and honest enough relationship where you can be assertive and say, when you do that, that irritates me. And that starts a really, really important conversation. 2 words I want to throw out for you to think about: intentions versus impact. So our intentions are obviously what the impact that we intend to have, but the impact is what other people feel. So if you can be assertive and say, hey, when you do this, it makes me feel this way, then that starts a conversation about intention versus impact. And in a healthy relationship where 2 people care about each other, which is actually the majority of our relationships, if you say, this is the way that you're making me feel, and the person can say, I'm sorry, I did not intend to make you feel that way. This was what my intention was. Now you've started a conversation about each other's intentions and impacts. And if you approach that with some amount of grace, then I think there's an enormous possibility that will greatly improve your ability to interact with other people.
I like that. I thought about that.
Yeah, that is the magic sauce right there. I think honestly, for relationships, if you can get to that point in a relationship, and the thing is that I actually think that if you get to that point in a relationship, it's self-reinforcing, right? So you get yourself into a virtuous cycle in which you learn to trust each other more. As you learn to trust each other more, the more willing you are to have those conversations. The more you have those conversations, the more you trust each other. So it's I hazard to say it, but it's pretty close to a magical formula for relationships.
That concludes our conversation on accommodating emotions. In our next episode, we'll talk about using emotions.